Back. Did you know that 80% of SAP's customers are small to medium-sized businesses? You are the backbone of our economy. Every year, we help businesses like yours to take advantage of the unlimited opportunities that are out there for fast-growth companies. Join us now as we talk to some of your peers about how they achieved the agility they needed to compete effectively. Our Head of New Business Sales, UK and Ireland Midmarket, Brian Mortimer, Andrew Brown, CFO of Rooney, and Diarmuid Byrne, Managing Director of Equi Ratings.
Thank you, Enda. Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to the Unlimited Opportunities for Fast Growth Companies panel discussion. Change has never been this fast, and if you think about it, it will never be this slow again. I know many of our attendees are rightly anxious about how quickly our existing business models are being disrupted. But still, if you're anxious, imagine how the people who aren't with us today are feeling. I know that digital transformations aren't easy. That's why we do them every decade or so. And I could talk all day about how a transformation journey with SAP makes sense, but you'll be very glad to hear that I'm joined by two of our customers today. Two customers who are on an unbelievable growth trajectory, Rooney and Equi Ratings. A very warm welcome to Andrew and Diarmuid. So without further ado, let's start the discussion. And if I could start possibly with Diarmuid, can you tell us a little bit more about who Equi Ratings are and your journey to date?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. It's always an interesting opportunity when you get a chance to look back a little bit at the last 4 or 5 years, or even a little bit longer, and you think, God, we were quite a way back. So when we talk about small and medium-sized businesses, we were very small. I was initially working as a lawyer. My best friend, who I was in university with, he decided that he was going to return to his farm and ride horses. All the rest of the people in his class were all off to investment banks, and he decided he wanted to continue his equestrian career. Now, it was a pretty good equestrian career. He was in the kind of World Games, Europeans. This year, he became an Olympian in Tokyo. But we basically saw this gap. We say now, it sounds now like we had a big plan. We didn't really, but we are a sports data company in equestrian sports. So the only real place that sports data in equestrian sports existed up until kind of 5 or 6 years ago was really just in gambling, in racing. And outside of that, all of the things we've become so used to in golf and in tennis and all across the American sports in particular, where we're looking at, percentage of shots completed, all of possession stats in football, all the basics now for every other sport and for every other kind of fan experience, that just didn't exist at all in equestrian sports. So from the two of us, we've grown from a shed in a small county in Ireland, County Carlow, all the way to kind of, we managed at the Olympics this year, we were advising 12 Olympic teams. We manage our data and our ratings manage risk in every country in the world. So you can't enter a lot of equestrian competitions anywhere in the world without one of our risk ratings allowing you to enter. We work with brands all around the world and events all around the world. So now we have a team of 12 now and growing every month, really. So yeah, a fun journey, still kind of coming up for air every so often and trying to make sure we're on the right track. But yeah, fun journey, and equestrian data is changing all the time because of us.
And being Irish myself, it always gives me great pride in seeing how our indigenous Irish startups have that confidence to go and take on the world, spot a gap in the market, and they've got that belief to go and, give everyone a bloody nose, even the guys that aren't there yet. You're first to market. That's really cool. So the events of the last 18 months must have been really difficult with no horse racing on and all the events and meets called off.
We knew we were in for a long period of change. And actually, it is that innovation that you talk about and that we're talking about all across today. We took our SAP technology and actually moved it into a kind of a simulated technology. And we began to actually put on these events, which were all built on simulations. So kind of like we had fantasy games that were usually played on live sport. So now we actually created the simulated competition. We brought in commentators from around the world to play these fantasy games on simulated events. So it all gets a little bit kind of meta, and we all find ourselves in that place where I think we experienced it a little bit last year where everybody was just willing to give something a try because we were all in this unusual area. I don't know if it'll work in 2022 as we return to normal life, but last year it worked. It got us through those difficult 18 months. And all of that was built on SAP technology. And we had a phone call from Germany kind of in April last year to say, we're going to stand beside you and make sure that A, you have the technology, and B, you have the support to make this happen. So there's a lot more, and we'll talk about it in a moment, but there's a lot more to the relationship than the technology.
Thank you, Dermot. And even if it doesn't work next year, I guess you guys now have the agility to pivot in another direction, which is really cool. And yeah, we'll get into it later. So, Andrew, pretty much the same question to you. Can you tell us a little bit about who Uni are in your journey?
Yep, sure. And for the record, I have an Irish granny, and one of our founders has an Irish passport. So I think we sort of.
I tell you what, Andrew, right? I'm trying to think of a joke around, an Irish man and a Scottish man walking to the Midmarket Summit. Maybe I'll get the punchline by the time we finish.
Don't know, something to do with whiskey, definitely. So I'm from Uni Pizza Ovens. We were formed in 2012 by husband and wife team, Davina Garland, she's the Irish one, and Christian Tapanino, not so Irish. Basically, the business was formed from Christian becoming a little bit of a have-a-go baker at home and getting into pizzas and realising that he couldn't really get the quality of pizza that he wanted from his home oven. And quickly realised that if you want a good pizza, you need to cook it at extremely high temperatures. So he Googled portable pizza ovens because he didn't fancy installing one in his back garden and making his landlord a lot richer, and got no hits, and has that sort of entrepreneurial mind that goes, well, I'll just make one then, and spoke to a metal fabricator that he knew and got the first Uni prototype knocked up in within a couple of weeks, which amazingly worked. So Christian and Darina started one of the UK's first Kickstarter campaigns and raised about 15 grand on that, which from day one meant that we were direct consumer, international, and had built up a following of brand ambassadors essentially who'd bought into our story. So from that start, roll forward a few years, teams growing, sales are building up, a bit more of a distribution network, manufacture set up in China, distribution in the US and in Germany and in the UK. We decided it was time to grow up a little bit in terms of our systems, and we implemented SAP Business by Design from the start of 2019, which at the time for a business of 25 people or so was probably a little bit of a stretch, to be honest. We had a sort of skeleton back office, skeleton finance team, but we made it work. And by the time we got to the start of 2020, thank God we had, because as you might imagine, with the huge caveat of a pandemic is clearly a terrible thing, and there's so many people that suffered, and we realise how lucky we are through this. But the combination of affluent middle class people not being allowed to go on holiday, being forced to socialise outdoors, and not being allowed to go to pizza restaurants was pretty phenomenal set of circumstances for a home pizza oven company. So
Absolutely.
we grew, yeah. So from March 2020, we grew from 50 people to now over 200. And in terms of transaction volumes, we're about at least 15 times more. So yeah, it's been a crazy journey in the last 18 months, dealing with that growth, dealing with possibly some of the most turbulent supply chain conditions that the world has ever seen, all while working from home, all while onboarding 150 people and trying to bring them into the culture of the business and get them up to speed with all of our processes. But challenging, but ultimately rewarding for us.
And building a culture whilst everyone's working remote as well, right? It's even more challenging. So congratulations. It's a wonderful story for an organization that's 10 years old next year.
Yep, 10 years
Incredible.
next year.
Yeah. If I stay on that track, there's never an easy time to do an ERP project, and because it can be challenging and can be daunting. We can often look for an excuse to not do it, and a global pandemic is a great excuse to not do it. And I'm sure there's many customers who decided to hunker down and not do it. The fact that you had it in place prior to the pandemic, how has that helped you to gain the agility to deal with a pandemic and to deal with changing circumstances and changing buying behaviors, and the fact that people now needed outdoor pizza ovens? How did having your ERP in place give you a differentiator against, I don't even know if you had competitors, but how did it help your business to overcome that challenging scenario and embrace an opportunity?
Yeah, we do have competitors, but I won't name them. Probably the most telling aspect is, as I said, when we implemented, it was a bit of a skeleton back office that we had, and we hadn't implemented every single aspect of the system. And the areas that we hadn't fully implemented were the areas that we really struggled with. The sort of demand planning and the order allocations, because we were on pre-order for a lot of the year. Those were still managed on not even Excel, on Google Sheets, which is even worse. And you could see the absolute chaos that ensued as we tried to just build on this as more and more complexity was thrown into the equation. Mainly for us, it was around those pre-orders where we were taking a lot of payment upfront from customers and then delivering up to 4, 5, 6, 10 weeks later, even in some cases, which is really complex to manage. It doesn't feel like it should be, but across multiple platforms and e-commerce stores, it very quickly grows arms and legs. And the parts of the system that we did have under control and that we had built up a bit of practice on and a bit of familiarity were the bits that just kept us going and gave us a bit more of a stable undercurrent to deal with the complexity on top of it. And when I think about what our processes were only 18 months before the pandemic, the thought of going through that with zero spreadsheets, emails back and forth with warehouses and 3PL partners, I honestly just don't think we would have been able to cope. We would have just broken down. Processes would have broken down. It would have been absolute chaos. So having taken that leap, and what was quite an ambitious implementation for us at the time, I don't think it really was justified by our scale then, but it was the belief in the ambition and the belief in the potential of the business that we would need it soon enough that we stretched ourselves, and yeah, thank God we did.
Amazing. So Dermot, if I'm to come to you and bring you back in, what advice would you have for other small businesses considering, a move to SAP?
I think there's loads of ways of looking at that, Brian. I think Andrew sums it up really well, and that, when you think about that change that happens in 2019, none of us had any real idea as to how it would happen next. In terms of the advice, I would echo almost all of what Andrew said in terms of the readiness, the ability to scale. The things I would add on top for a very small business. So at the time when we began to implement SAP, initially I think we had 3 or 4 people. You can imagine how mad people thought it was that you would build, what the market will often deem as to be very big, corporate, heavy technology. When you're a small startup, you're looking for what's free. Excel, nothing wrong with it. Why don't I just keep going on Excel? And some of those reasons for us became, and again, we didn't know them at the time, but some of the reasons became things like the confidence that big clients who are dealing with you take from seeing the SAP logo alongside yours. Things like startups who are joining accelerators and startups who are working with different mentors around the world. We had SAP consultants work alongside us to ensure not just that the SAP technology worked well, but also that we were following good business practice. And you can't get enough of that, age 1, 2, 3, 4, age 10 of a business. You just don't. I don't think, if you're really honest, that you get enough of it at any point where you're not constantly learning from people. So in terms of the advice to any startup, if it was SAP based or not, it would be, to, I suppose, to embrace all of the different thinking that comes with it. And also to any startup is you've got to fake it till you make it. Whether Rooney are running around behind the scenes trying to ensure that the Excel sheets work, that's exactly what Equiratings were doing. There was a huge amount of our business which was initially built on Excel and macro, and it wasn't until SAP Analytics Cloud began to allow us to do much more complex simulations that actually we began to, I suppose, be able to involve a lot more transparency, a lot more predictability, a lot more confidence from the market in what we were doing, rather than these 2 guys or these 10 guys who were predicting the equestrian market, or what was going to happen in the equestrian market. So broad answer, Brian, but in terms of advice, I would say you don't know what's around the corner, so you're building for that. I think you always would be naive to think that you don't have a lot more to learn. We all know that simple technologies and easy to access and free to use technologies will get you so far. And it's for the businesses really that want to prepare for or take that next step that I would say it's worth considering, if you can find an SAP technology that will allow you to begin that journey.
Superb. And you mentioned Excel, and I think Excel is wonderful. I use it every day. And it's great for the first couple of years, but when you want to move on to something else around real true analytics, I do think you need to step up to an SAP type. So that's really interesting to hear coming from you as well. You touched on it a little bit at the start, about how having SAP has actually brought some value to your customers or partners. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, no secret, really. I mean, if you're a small business with, as I say, like we began with 2, with 3, with 4, and that was all Excel. And that was Excel, middle of the night macros, trying to make ourselves, people would say to us like, we had like Olympic teams say like, we'll fly and meet you at your offices. We were like, no, we'll come to you,
Yeah.
So the key, I suppose, is that in those days, you've got to present yourself as being capable of you're able to get the smaller deals and people, but if anyone feels they're taking a risk with you, it's not really what people are looking for. It's definitely not what they're looking for if they're looking to pick Olympic teams, if they're looking to manage risk around the world. If you want to go and deal with a global organization or major distributors like Rooney, they need to have confidence in your process. And that meant for us that as a very small company, to be able to attach our very small company to a very big trusted powerhouse, it made sense for us to be able to say, well, by the way, it isn't just us. Like we work with SAP technology. Everything that you're going to get is built on A, B, and C. We learned how to sell simulations and predictive analytics in a way that we never could have said, we designed an algorithm in Excel and it works. So we now are able to say, like, we work with, the latest, greatest explainable AI. And we don't just say, here's why something will happen. We say, here's all the reasons that go behind why that thing is happening. And that's all out of the box in Analytics Cloud. So yeah, it made so much, it allowed us to make ourselves feel and look a lot bigger than we are. And that was important for internal confidence as much as it was for the market.
So, but I have to finish by asking, what's next? Dermot, what's next for Equiratings?
We're growing the team. We're growing into different sectors of the market. We've a World Games coming up. We've a Paris Olympics where, everybody else is just getting over Tokyo and all of the teams are moving to Paris 2024. So, full steam ahead, Brian.
Amazing. Andrew, what's next for Rooney?
World domination, I think. We see where we are right now and the potential that we have to move into new markets with new products, broadening along the sort of pizza vertical as opposed to just ovens. It's the ingredients and accessories, everything that goes along with it. And the last 2 years has given us a huge amount of confidence, and particularly the last 3 or 4 months as we've come out of sort of lockdown and the pandemic is sort of becoming less and less of a pervasive factor. We're still seeing growth. We're still seeing enthusiasm for our products. So really, sky's the limit for us.
Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Loved the conversation. Loved your journeys. Really inspirational. We'll leave it there. Hopefully next year we might see you in a physical setting. But for now, back over to you, Enda.